Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the very... There we go. I'm not going to get feedback now. Welcome to the very first Place Select Committee for Nottinghamshire County Council. For those that don't know, I'm Councillor Nigel Moxon. I'm the chairman of this Select Committee. To my right is Councillor Tom Hollis, who's the vice chairman. To my left is Martin Elliott, who is the Senior Scrutiny Officer, who will be helping to guide us, not just myself and Tom, but the whole committee on we can and can't do and all that sort of thing. So without further ado, we'll move into the agenda. So first of all, apologies for absence. Keith?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Elizabeth Williamson and due to medical reasons, and Councillor Perdue Horan is attending as her substitute today.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Councillor Perdue Horan. Second on the agenda is declarations of interest by members and officers. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests or private interest, whether pecuniary or non-pecuniary? No. So the third item on the agenda is the terms of reference. So you'll have all seen that in your report packs, and this just confirms the names of those members that are on the this panel, on this committee, and that was obviously agreed at the full council meeting in May. So that report is just for noting. And so then we move on to agenda item 4, which is the work programme, and it's going to be a presentation and discussion item. So we're going to have two presentations, one by the Place team, who are going to run through what the Place Department does very briefly. I think we've only set about 4 hours for it, is that right? And then Martin's going to do a short presentation on what the select committees are here for and what they do and that sort of thing. And then we'll have just a very brief discussion where all members will get a chance to give their ideas on what we should be discussing in the coming year. So without further ado, I will hand over to starting Adrian.
Thank you, Chairman. So just ever so briefly from me, because it's got my name on the first slide, I notice. My colleagues here are going to walk you through their respective parts of the Place Department. Delighted to be joined by two of our 3 cabinet members that we report to as well. And it is a very broad and wide-ranging department, as you'll hear, that's all backed into the Nottinghamshire plan. But am I handing Derek to start off, and then they'll walk you through the presentation in turn. Maybe it's best to save any clarifications to the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Good morning, everybody. For members who may not know me, my name is Derek Heaton, so I'm Service Director for Communities and Place. My other colleague, Matt Neal, will introduce.
Morning also, Matthew Neal. I'm the Service Director for Investment and Growth within the Place Department.
Thanks, Matt. So we'll, as the chairman has said, we'll take probably 20 minutes or so just to walk you through a presentation that gives you an overview of the work and the services that sit within the Place Department, and we'll place all of that hopefully within the kind of corporate context that we operate in, and we'll also outline for you just a little bit more information about the kind of key pieces of work that we've got going on within the Place Department at present. And I think you've all got a hard copy of the slides as well, so hopefully that should mean that you can read everything that I'm talking to you about. So just to get started then, as Adrian has mentioned, the council plan approved towards the end of last year has got kind of 4 key themes, and the Place Department is relatively unique in terms of the county council's departments, in that we make a significant contribution to all of those 4 key themes across the range of services that we manage on behalf of the council and deliver to our residents. Obviously, we make a significant contribution to the themes around the environment and economy, growth and living standards, but we also make a significant contribution through a range of services to the health and well-being agenda, and also to obviously all those issues around transport, connectivity, but also the quality of life that people enjoy across the county as well. Just then, a reminder of those 9 broad ambitions that sit underneath the themes within the council plan. I won't labour the point, but hopefully, as you'll see as we work through the presentation in the next few minutes, you'll see that our services make a significant contribution to all of those corporate and collective ambitions that we have as well. So, our overall kind of place services, we've got a significant number of services across the department, and many of those offer face-to-face provision and services to our residents. They're universal, they're open access. So on any given day, we've got nearly 1 million people across the county accessing some, part, all of those services, whether it's children receiving a school meal, whether it's visitors accessing our country parks, people going to libraries, people using all of our property and buildings. There are a myriad of ways that the public, staff and partners engage with and use our services every day of every week of the year. And so our services touch every single one of our residents. We don't just work with a targeted group of residents. We're there for everyone, and we're there all the way through the various stages of everybody's lives. I'll talk in a bit about our registration service. So we do births, marriages and deaths. We support children and young people through their school lives. We support people into adulthood through our skills and community education work, and we support people in accessing a whole range of cultural learning and life opportunities through our broader range of services. And of course, on a daily basis, we help everybody get about too. So we're absolutely fundamental as a department and as a set of services to the offer that the council makes to the public. Overall, as I hope we'll be able to demonstrate, our performance as a department is pretty good, and we've managed to maintain many of our most valued and most popular services through the last 10 years of what's been a difficult financial climate for local government. And of course, those challenges remain now and will continue into the future. But we've managed to keep reinventing ourselves, keep redesigning our services, and keep evolving so that we're kind of fit for the future, if you like. So Matt and I are the two service directors that work directly to Adrian across the department, and we're divided up into 2 divisions, and I'll just hand over, Matt, to you now just to talk members through your areas of responsibility.
Thanks, Derek. Do you mind moving the slide on one more, please? Great, thank you. Thank you, Derek, and again, morning. So, what I want to start with was the planning team. So, as part of the investment and growth division, we have 3 teams within there. So, we have economic development, property, and planning. Starting with the planning function, we deal with, or we are the planning authority in relation to applications for all minerals and waste applications in the county, as well as county council development. So hopefully you're all aware that we deal with planning applications, and certainly Councillor Butler does, dealing with minerals and waste, and with our big infrastructure projects such as the schools, where county council developments, and also employment sites. We also prepare the minerals and waste local plans. Some of you will have seen that in 2021 we approved the minerals and waste local plan for Nottinghamshire, and that will now run through to 2036. So looking at all of the minerals and waste needs of the county, and that's been taken into account as part of our minerals and waste local planning. We also manage developer contributions. So again, some of you will have been involved with this team around the SIL, again, Councillor Introna, around the SIL and the Section 106 contributions, and how that formulates as part of the local planning process, but also then how we draw down those funds to support some of the developments that they contribute to. There's also a highways development control element to the planning authority. So again, we advise our local and district borough colleagues around the development of their local plan and their plans for specific developments, and implement the sort of highways and guidance, but also advise around the appropriateness of the application, and then and advise on the transport side of those applications and feed those in as part of that process. Also work with councillor colleagues around feeding in their comments as part of the wider developments. We're a statutory consultee for the local and local council plans, but also national government. So again, we provide advice in relation to those. Some of you will have seen that we've responded more recently to the planning reforms from central government, that we've responded on behalf of the county council with our views, and so that's a process that we undertake as well within the team. We're a key partner in terms of the delivery of growth and infrastructure delivery, and feed in all of the comments from those things to ensure the economic development prosperity of the county is considered in all of the development and delivery that have gone through within the county, and that planning team can also advise around the policy aspects of planning. Some of our conservation and archaeological activity as well. We whilst we undertake a significant number of conservation activity, so for example hosting the Greenwood Community Forest Partnership, and then the Trees for Climate Change programme, so running that on behalf of leading that with DEFRA funding. We also manage and maintain the historic record for the county as well, so looking at our ancient monuments, where we have sites that have a historic nature. All of that is part of the work that we do within the planning function. Wider than that, we work with our district partners and borough partners, but also wider than that, we work with some of our regional partners. So, for example, South Yorkshire and the wider East Midlands region, we work with those colleagues around how developments take place, and just making sure that developments, or large developments that happen in those areas, that we also factor in the Nottinghamshire aspect as well. And then I guess finally we work with the East Midlands Development Corporation as well around the initiatives there, so supporting them in the work that they are doing in terms of the power station site, Towton and Chetwynd, but also East Midlands Airport. So we do work with colleagues in the East Midlands Development Corporation quite closely around those elements as well. Thank you, Derek. So the next slide is our economic development team, and the economic development activity that we undertake within the Place Department. We split that down into 5 specific areas. So just giving you a sort of overview of each of those areas, because we wanted to provide bespoke support and advice as part of the economy and the economic development work and growth work that we do. So we do work with people. So with, and under the people banner, we provide support around skills to our residents, but also to businesses. So making sure that the right talent and the right training and qualifications are provided by our education partners to support integration back into work, employment initiatives, and also that we have the right skills within the economy for the things that are being delivered by our businesses. You will have picked up some of the initiatives that this area is focusing on is around community Renewal Fund, where we've got a number of projects that are looking at investment in skills, but also investment in local business as part of the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. But that we're also working as well on the and with our district and borough partners around the UK Shared Prosperity funding and taking some of the learnings from those projects as well into that area as well. But also you'll know that we provide support through careers hubs and making the links with D2N2 and again through the education establishments. We also support them in terms of career hubs and matching young people to future career options and placements. In the next one, we also provide support to business. So some of you will have come across our growth and employment hub that we work with as part of the D2N2 LEP, and that allows businesses to access finance and other advice as part of that process. We get over or near enough 200 inquiries a week from businesses looking to access that support. We also provide workshops for our businesses around how they can access opportunities. So, for example, we held a workshop around the potential opportunities delivered by High Speed 2, but also the opportunities with the council as well. So we do quite a lot of work with our businesses. The Cabinet Member for Economic Development is always pushing us to do a bit more work with the businesses and make sure we're represented at some of their forums. So we do a lot of work with local business and local business forums as part of that process. The visitor economy, those of you will have seen that we have a visitor economy strategy. We are in the process currently of refreshing that, and that might be one area that this committee wants to look at. However, what we have been doing as part of the visitor economy strategy is supporting visitor economy hubs, and also bringing together toolkits that can support some sectors of our economy. So, for example, you will have seen the food and drink toolkit that was promoted quite successfully within the county. We've also supported our district and borough colleagues, so in particular Bassetlaw, around some of their visitor economy initiatives. So the Mayflower commemorative programme, as well as the Pilgrim's Journey. You will have seen all of those initiatives happening around the visitor economy strategy and the support that our visitor economy services have given. The next one is infrastructure. So we work again with national highways and some of the big infrastructure projects, supporting them where it impacts and touches on Nottinghamshire. So working on projects such as potential plans around the A46, plans in respect of the A1 and also the A52. So big highways, national highway strategic projects. We work to make sure that we achieve all of the benefits from those projects for the county, but also county considerations are taken into consideration as part of those developments. But we also work on county council specific infrastructure initiatives. So the A614, for example, and A6097 programme, that's the team in the economic development part of the service that is leading and supporting and delivering that particular project with our colleagues at VIA. The next one is around digital connectivity. A real success with regard to the digital connectivity across the county. Nearly 99% of premises within the county are able to access super fast broadband, and also in the region of around 30% of residential and business premises can access gigabit. The gigabit network as well, and it means that we are one of the most digitally connected counties nationally. We are in the top 3 in terms of digital connectivity. So real success for the county in terms of what we provide through digital connectivity. And hopefully you will have seen the work of the team around 5G at Sherwood Forest and also across Bestwood and Ollerton in relation to the work we're doing there around the Healthy Forests initiative. And some of you may well have seen recently in the Times some of the work that they've been doing around the robotic dog that also looks at the health of the forest as well. So we're also looking at how some of these initiatives and the fact that we are well connected can support other initiatives within the county. And then finally, a lot of work being done specifically around place, and that incorporates a number of things. That incorporates the work we're doing with the East Midlands Development Corporation, as talked about earlier, but also how we work with our district and borough partners around the towns funds, the levelling up funds, and the other funds that are coming into our districts and our boroughs as part of that towns fund and levelling up funding initiative. And you will have seen recently the Cabinet Member for Economic Development has signed off a number of reports in relation to the Levelling Up Fund bids that are being proposed to be submitted to government by our district and borough colleagues, and we have supported them in that process, and that's what this team does on a day-to-day basis. It works with those colleagues around the bids, how they're being put together, and what their proposals are, and how they can also be supported by the County Council. And then some of the other initiatives are around our environmental aspects. So, for example, with regard to the warm homes funding that has been provided, but as well the work we're doing with our colleagues in housing around social housing decarbonisation. So some of our projects have recently started in relation to the social housing decarbonisation pilot. So these are the things that the place part of the department are working on. Next slide, please, Derek. And then finally, we also run the property service within my area of the business. So that incorporates, as you can see from the slide, a number of different things. So we look after the asset management of the county council. So that's things like spare bits of land that have been bought as part of highways projects. It can include some of our empty properties. All of these things the service manages with our partners ARC in the main, and I'll come on to a bit more of the work that we do with our colleagues at ARC, but we look after the assets there. We also do we also have a big leasing and licensing area of the team, because of the nature of the portfolio of property that the county council has, and also because of the work that we do with schools around academisation, and which requires a lot of work around the lease aspects of that, but also just with the other bits of land that we hold on to. So significant amount of work there, and you will have seen operational decisions going through the EDAM cabinet member as well as myself around some of the leases and licenses that we let on our property. And then we do a lot of work around property maintenance. Some of you might be aware of our corporate landlord proposals. So that's where we're looking after all of the estate within the county council, and then looking after how they are maintained. And then working through that, we have access to the property data, which is on our P2 system, and then our major projects. I'll leave it there and hand over to Derek.
Thanks, Matt. It's a chance for you to draw a breath.
Thank you.
So that's one half then of our department. And I'll just take a few minutes to just talk you through, therefore, the areas that I have direct responsibility for, which are kind of listed there, and you've got the detail in your slide. Starting then with our catering and facilities management service. So this is relatively rare as a council service for Nottinghamshire in that it's wholly traded, so it operates on a commercial basis with schools and a range of other clients as well, other public sector organisations like councils and the fire service, for example, and also some private sector contracts as well. This is one of the biggest services, if not the biggest service within single service within the council. So we have well over 1,500 employees, many working in a part-time capacity as cleaners, catering assistants, chefs and so on, across the business, and it is a business as much as it is a service. And logistically, it's a really complicated and interesting part of the council's set of services. So you can see there that we deliver, on average, 38,000 meals a day in our schools. The act of putting 38,000 meals on the table, as you know, if you feed your own family of an evening or at the weekend, is extremely complicated, both in terms of logistics, supplies, materials, staffing arrangements. If you extrapolate all of that up, you're looking at in the region of 8 million meals a year that the service delivers. So to do that in a way that's both secure and of a good quality is a real achievement. And the service delivers both good food standards, good food and reliable service to hundreds of schools and thousands of children every day. Likewise, you'll see at the bottom of the slide, the service now manages County Enterprise Foods, which is the council's kind of Meals on Wheels service for vulnerable elderly people. Again, good quality food, logistically challenging with clients situated all around the county. So we have to deliver food safely to them at the right temperature and of the right quality. And again, we support that business through some external contracts as well. And lastly, for this service, it's been critical through the pandemic, for obvious reasons, that we've been able to keep our buildings hygienically secure, clean, and our cleaning and facilities management team absolutely stepped up to the plate during the last couple of years. It's a really challenging sector to work in. All kinds of challenges around labour, workforce and recruitment and retention. But through the last few years, the service has done really well to ensure that our buildings, where they've been required, both office and service settings, have been open, they've been clean, they've been safe and they've been secure. And that started to see a return for us in terms of customers coming back to us and retaining us. Because of the quality of the service that the team have provided there. So it's a really significant service for the County Council, and sometimes goes a little bit under the radar. Moving on then to emergency planning and registrations, kind of staying on that COVID theme. We've had, over the last few years, probably the biggest emergency that any one of us could have imagined. I've slipped on the slide there, I think, haven't I? Yeah. So we've had what can fairly be described as a major emergency, and our emergency planning team have been an absolutely central part of both the council's response to COVID, but also the multi-agency response through the local resilience forum that all of the public sector, including health and the emergency services, brought to bear, particularly in the early phase of the pandemic, when we were in that full lockdown phase, and we were all kind of finding out what life was like under lockdown back in March, April and May 2020. The emergency planning team absolutely stepped up to the plate, and we received a lot of recognition from partners around the contribution that the County Council, kind of funneled through our emergency planning team, made to both that first phase of the pandemic, but the longer term phase as well. But it's not just that kind of emergency that the emergency planning team support us with. We'll be all familiar with the kind of flooding incidents that we've had over the last few years in Nottinghamshire, for example, and occasionally incidents such as significant fires that occur from time to time, and this team helps us manage, coordinate and respond to that, and plays a critical role in linking up with our other significant partners as well. As we sit here across the road from Trent Bridge Cricket Ground and the City Ground as well, it's worth saying that the service is the lead regulator, if you like, for the safety of our big sports stadia as well. And with Nottingham Forest getting promoted this season into the Premier League, that kind of role is absolutely critical, both to the club, to the community, supporters and visiting fans as well. We don't secure the safety of Notts County, if you're interested, because that sits over the boundary, of course, in the City Council. But we all know the history of significant accidents and tragedies that have happened in sports stadia, both in this country and around the world over recent years. And so that is an absolutely critical role that the service performs for Nottinghamshire too. Stepping away from that kind of emergency management and response role, the service also picks up responsibility for our registration and celebratory services, births, marriages and deaths. And again, that's one of our key frontline services that kind of goes a little bit under the radar. So as we've come out of the pandemic over the last year, our registration staff have personally managed and delivered 3,500 weddings as we started to pick up on the backlog of people who were unable to get married or enter into a civil partnership during the pandemic, and have restarted their lives. And this service has been a big part of that process. It's another one of those services that sees a really relatively small team of dedicated staff go out of their way to deliver brilliant services to local people. It's not unknown for this service, for example, to visit hospitals or private homes late at night to support families in that moment of death as well. And again, it's not something that we publicise, but those staff really do go the extra mile. Moving on then to our other kind of regulatory service within place, trading standards and communities. If Mark Walker, our head of trading standards, was here this morning, he'd be keen to tell you that trading standards is what he would describe as the second oldest profession in the world. It was the first council function, along with highways, back when county councils were established in the late 19th century. The Weights and Measures was a kind of foundation service for local authorities, and that function, that role, continues to this day. The service also plays a big part in regulating food standards within Nottinghamshire, both at a commercial and a traded setting, and also manages a whole range of regulatory activities around fair trade, anti-fraud activity, and the protection of vulnerable residents against things like scam and fraud, whether that's online or in person or through kind of small traders. So again, the service plays a key role in helping protect the vulnerable, and it has a really strong record in successfully chasing and prosecuting those who do engage in fraud or who put vulnerable people at risk through their trading practice. We also host the East Midlands Regional Investigations Team on behalf of a range of local authorities across the East Midlands, and that team manages more major investigations and criminal prosecutions into more organised fraud activity. And some of that activity is significant in terms of both its regional but also its national reach as well, and has resulted in significant and successful prosecutions that involve a number of businesses, a number of individuals and a lot of money. An area of growth for this service over the last few years, particularly the last couple of years, has been our communities function. Over the years, this council, along with many other county councils in particular, had reduced its overall communities function for reasons of austerity and financial restriction. Over the last couple of years, what we've been able to do is rebuild a lot of that work that we've had on pause for a little while about re-entering, re-engaging with our local communities, particularly through the lens of that COVID response. So it's this part of the council that was engaged and has been engaged in supporting residents with access to food parcels in the early stages of the pandemic, and has also helped plug in the various volunteer networks that sit around the counties to support those who are vulnerable. It's also this team that's managed our social recovery fund and our COVID-related monies over the last couple of years. If we bring all of that up to date, the team is now managing Nottinghamshire's Household Support Fund and has done so successfully for the last 18 months or so, which secures food and energy vouchers for those who need it most. And we're also managing the Homes for Ukraine scheme through this team too. And we're up to around about 1,200 Ukrainian guests, either with us or on their way to us in Nottinghamshire right now, with around about 600 homes either hosting or waiting to host those Ukrainian guests. So absolutely front and centre in a whole range of our kind of responses to emerging social issues across the county. Most recently, the teams helped celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and organise a lot of the County Council's input into that. And we host our Armed Forces coordination work as well. And we offer a gold standard service there to support both current serving soldiers, veterans, and those who are associated with the armed forces as well. And we're really proud that Nottinghamshire is able to reach that gold standard. And many councils aren't able to do so and don't fund that level of activity. Last area for this team is community safety. Clearly, as a county council, we have a really strong strategic relationship with the police and our district and borough partners who also have some significant community safety responsibilities. Our role here is kind of knitting things together, making sure our strategic arrangements are in place. And this team helps manage that effectively too. So emergency planning and registration and our communities teams are two of our smaller services. So from that extreme to the other, largest service, it's certainly in funding terms, is through our highways and transport arrangements. I'm sure members know that the County Council bears responsibility for highways and pavements in Nottinghamshire. If you didn't know that, I'm happy to confirm that for you now. We put a significant amount of funding, both revenue and capital, every year into management and maintenance of the highways. And of course, you'll be aware that we've undertaken, and we've got some members who've been part of that review, we've undertaken a significant highways review over the last year and are now in the act of implementing and delivering on those recommendations. So I won't get into too much detail there. We deliver most of those services through VIA, which is the council's wholly owned highways company, and most of our highways maintenance activities delivered through VIA. Staying on the broader issue, though, of streets and street scene, we're also responsible for parking enforcement in conjunction with district and borough councils as well. But we act as the hosts for parking officers around Nottinghamshire and also in some of our other local authority partners as well, including Derbyshire. So we're responsible for highways parking enforcement as well. This part of the world also picks up our responsibility as the lead flood authority around flood risk management. We've been fortunate over the last 18 months or so. We haven't had any significant flooding episodes, but we know that we have a history of that in Nottinghamshire, and of course we have a major river running straight through the county, and that Trent corridor is absolutely a significant part of our kind of activity around flood risk management, and it's a good example of a place where our emergency planning and our operational services coincide. But we've got a good track record of delivering flood improvement schemes, securing external funding, notably and most recently in Southwell, where we're just coming towards the end of a £6 million flood mitigation scheme. And we've got a clear and very accessible flood risk strategy that has recently been approved by the council as well. This part of the world manages our rights of way service as well. Again, something often close to the hearts of both the public and members, and it comes with, it's a contested space in some parts of the county as well. Lots of operational issues there, both from a maintenance perspective, but from an access and a permissions perspective as well. And lastly, our highways and transport team manage our public transport arrangements, so our bus arrangements as well. Both our internal fleet and our internal ways of managing and moving clients around the county, but also the support we offer to the public through local bus arrangements as well. And that's a mixture of support for the commercial sector and a mixture of subsidy as well, and subsidised routes. We've been successful in the last few months in securing with partners around about £30 million worth of funding and allocation for bus service improvements, and over the next 4 or 5 years we'll be rolling out a whole range of activity and schemes and programmes to ensure that we continue to support local buses and local travellers in the county. This council is one of, if not the, largest individual kind of subsidiser amongst county councils of local buses. We put about £4.1 million a year of council revenue into local bus. Many councils in county settings have pulled that money away completely over the last few years. So we're lucky to be able to continue that funding. I'm conscious of time, but in terms of our place commissioning services, so this is the part of the department where we don't directly deliver a range of services, but instead develop and rely upon directly commissioned and contracted services. So Matt mentioned earlier our partnership with ARC, the council's property construction and design company. Mick Allen and his team in place commissioning are the commissioners of ARC, and they manage that contractual relationship with ARC. And that's seen as deliver around about £250 million worth of capital investment across the county in a variety of schemes over the last 6 years or so. This team is also responsible for our waste management contract and arrangements with Veolia, and as we are the disposal authority for Nottinghamshire, this is the point of expertise within the council for household waste recycling centres and the management of those arrangements. It manages as well our PFI arrangements, both in terms of schools and, as I mentioned, with the Veolia PFI too. Our schools PFIs are all now mature, so we're starting to think about what the arrangements might be post-PFI in quite a few locations in the south of the county and in the far north of the county where we have schools and PFIs. But they are financially significant for the county council, and of course they touch upon the lives of many thousands of families and children as well. And lastly, and I suspect this might be an area that members are going to be interested in, we've got a bullet point in there that says cultural services. So this is the part of the world that manages all of our library arrangements through Inspire, so our 60 libraries around the county. It manages through Inspire our adult and community learning arrangements, our school music provision, and our arts provision, both for children, young people and adults as well. And we also act as the point of commissioning for our country park services as well. So in Nottinghamshire, our country parks are now managed successfully by a range of partners. Up at Sherwood Forest, we have the RSPB. In Rufford, we have Parkwood managing the service for us. And at the National Water Sports Centre, or Home Pierpont, we have Serco managing the service for us. So a range of different contractual models that work there, all of which have in common a significant uptick in visitor numbers and investment in the facilities over the last 5 or 6 years. So in a good year, we haven't had a good year for a couple of years because of the pandemic, but so hopefully this year will be better. You're looking at nearly 1 million visitors to our country parks over the course of the year. So again, a really significant public-facing service. and lots of complexity in the management arrangements. I'll just touch on, before I finish, because Matt and I have talked you through the services, just wanted to touch on that slide and missed it earlier on, which kind of gives you an overview, and you're probably better off looking at at your slides themselves, but it gives you a bit of an overview as to where the money's spent. And you can see there that yellow chunk on the right-hand side, we're looking at 55 million pounds investment a year in highways and transport. So a significant chunk of investment in road maintenance. What we're not capturing there is our capital investment. This is just our revenue budget investment, and a significant investment in our bus and transport arrangements as well. You'll see too, I mentioned last of all in my input there, the place commissioning team, and you'll see there that we've got a spend of around about £50 million in our place commissioning team as well. And that covers our property functions, it covers our major cultural services contracts, and it covers, of course, our waste management arrangements and contractual arrangements. The last big chunk, at about 10 or 11 o'clock on the chart there, is our kind of communities function. That would have been a very, very small slice of the pie up until 2020. But because of the COVID and the investment in public support that we've seen over the last few years, those numbers are now much bigger. So you can start to see the level of investment that we're putting into communities across the county. A lot of that is temporary and not permanent, it's worth saying, but it does still represent a significant investment. It's also worth saying that a lot of this spend is contractually bound, and therefore we're not at liberty to simply move it around as we might sometimes wish to do, because we're tied into long-term arrangements for a whole range of our key services. But you can get a sense there of the size of the budget scope that we're dealing with. And as I say, this is revenue, not capital. If we were to share with you our capital spend, as I say, you'll have seen overall about £250 million worth of capital investment over the last 6 years, which has gone into delivering a whole range of projects, some of which Matt talked about, but upwards of 10 new schools are included in that, for example. I'll stop there because we've probably blinded you with all that activity. No, we're happy to take any questions or comments, or of course move on into the conversation about potential areas of focus.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Derek and Matt, for that very comprehensive thing. You did it well under the 4 hours that I set you, so thank you very much for that. I don't want to get into a massive debate about the police department and a big question and answer session, but has anybody got any questions or queries they want to sort of bring up at this point? I know Tom's got a question.
Yeah, I think really just to set the tone, really, I think, of how I certainly see this. I know Councillor Moxon and I have had the privilege of having many conversations about how we like to play this committee. But I think firstly, I think maybe before I begin that, I'd say welcome Councillor Moxon to the chairman of this committee, and also Martin Elliott, who members will be aware has just obviously been given the role of senior scrutiny officer. You know, I won't forget to remind him that he started his journey at Ashfield, so it's good to see him down at, in the senior role here now as well. But also to, I think, welcome the officers, because, you know, it's fair to say that we've got some really experienced members on this committee, and Matt and Derek certainly can expect some tough questions coming from us, and maybe Adrian will not be here for much longer to experience that, but I'm sure in the meantime he will as well. But I think we all come from political backgrounds, but I think in this committee I'd certainly endeavour from my role in it to take out the politics, because I think we aren't a decision-making body in this committee. We're a scrutiny officer, and I know many of you will be aware of this role from your district and borough council roles, and some of the longer-serving members on this council might remember the scrutiny before. I certainly don't. But I think that's kind of the role I'd like to see it play, and I'm actually quite pleased to see the membership list from the other groups, particularly, not to embarrass people, but, people like Councillor Butler and Councillor Upton, particularly, bringing the planning background and very good knowledge they've got, and Councillor Wheeler as another example, with particularly his knowledge in his day job with the commercial sector and some of the services there, and obviously Councillor Gowland, I know we'll all know, is a very good environmentalist and passionate about some of the things like the walks and some of the green agenda, which I think is going to be very important to our scrutiny on this panel going forward. But certainly something that Councillor Moxon and I have spoken about so far is, I think less is more. We do want to go into really great detail into some of the things we'd like to scrutinise, but in the same breath, we don't want to do too much. And Martin's already warned me about trying to get too many things on the agenda, but I'd hope the work programme that we're going to discuss very shortly, we can beef out, but in the same breath, I think it's important that we delve down into some detail, and I'd like to make sure that certainly we get stuff from every group as a priority, but also that as a committee, and obviously we'll be getting things chucked down from the main overview as well, that we include. But I think the biggest difference between our committee and maybe some of the other select committees is, what does place mean? I feel I've been blessed to be on the council since 2013, and some of the stuff that Derek spoke about with things like the partnerships we have with like the RSPB, etc. That was decided. Councillor John Knight was the chairman of the committee, a committee that no longer exists and hasn't existed for 4 years, made that decision. So there's a lot of background. When you talk about things like adults or children's, we know what they are, but when you say place, I think sometimes, what does that really mean? And I'm not embarrassed to say that some of the things that was in that presentation, I'm not always sure it comes under our remit. So that's why we've included the presentation. That was Councillor Moxon's suggestion. But I really want to make sure that particularly we delve down into the points 1 to 9 of the council's priorities, and then kind of marry them up with what we're trying to achieve with the place. I think that's probably the end of my kind of opening gambit as the vice chair. But I think just with Councillor Moxon's indulgence, just to now add the things that we'd like to...
Can we do that in a bit?
Leave that on a bit. Is that not part of this item? Okay, we'll leave that then.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. You've stolen some of my thunder with some of that, but thank you very much. Saves my voice anyway. Councillor Turner, you've got a question.
Derek's fault. This. You mentioned twice under the radar, and one of the things that's always on residents' lips is value for money, what they get for the money. So perhaps we should be looking at increasing communications and trying to strengthen communications and letting residents actually know about, what we're actually doing, what you're achieving. Fantastic job, fantastic figures. Let them know.
Yeah, I thank you, Councillor Turner. I completely agree with that. I think there's always more that we can do to ensure that the public and residents are aware of what we're doing and why, and the contribution that we make as well. And we do put quite a bit of effort into communicating things. Sometimes good news is harder to sell than bad news, but absolutely, it's a point well made.
I think the key thing to the communication is ourselves. Basically, we communicating to our residents what you're communicating to us, and so if we can get that communication from yourselves, that would help, I believe. Thank you.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chairman. I often get asked the question by residents about the schools estate. And I admit I'm not absolutely sure about the academy world. Is it possible either now or at a later stage to clarify, are the academies, is the freehold still vested with the County Council, or are they on a long, long lease? And that's the question I often get asked, because I find it hard to understand the relationship we have with academies. And the second question was on VIA. Is there any relationship still with Cornwall County Council, or are we completely detached from Cornwall County Council? Fairly high-level question, but not the detail.
Thank you very much. Are there quick answers to both of those? Who's taking them?
So if I pick up on the second question first, and then Matt will pick up on the question around academies and leases. So the County Council in 2019 purchased the stakes of Cornwall County Council and Cormac in Via. So Via is now 100% owned by the County Council, and there are no remaining links. And Matt will pick up on the academies issue.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. So very simply, Roger, it's 125-year lease is the general standard that is applied to academies.
Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. Actually, I don't think that residents will think that value for money is achieved by a huge amount of communications. It's important for people to know what's going on, but I don't think that's a really good value for money use of a lot of money. Obviously, I'm not actually obsessed. Well, I suppose I am, but I'm not. I'm not only interested in the climate. I'm really interested in everything you've talked about, and I'm interested in everything in life. But I always end up here talking about the climate, unfortunately, and I really wish that wasn't the case. So it feels to me like it's, the council declared a climate emergency a year ago. I understand they're meant to be appointing a team dedicated to working on the climate. I suspect the communications team has been appointed, but the climate team still hasn't been appointed, so that's a big delay. I noticed you said the climate team was a commissioned team, but obviously that will then be in-house, presumably. So I would like to know really where that fits in here. It doesn't really get I noticed carbon somewhere. There's nothing about biodiversity. I noticed conservation, but I think the focus was more on buildings than on the environment. So it doesn't seem to have a solid home in this this section. Also, we've noticed the environmental policy is meant to be updated every 2 years and was due to be done in March, and I wondered when that was happening or if maybe we've missed it somewhere. And finally, on a slightly different note, because I am interested in everything, can I just check, the social housing decarbonisation, that does clearly include housing associations, does it? Thank you.
Councillor Gowland, thank you for that. So in terms of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, it's working with the district councils and their social housing. That was all part of the bid process in the initial wave. What's happened in future rounds of funding is still bidding on the basis that we're working with our partners at Bassett Law and Mansfield, but also local housing associations can bid directly into the fund themselves. So that's, if I can just pick up on the biodiversity point, apologies, it didn't clearly come out in the presentation. We are working on biodiversity strategy. We have a team that leads and supports biodiversity, as well as the local nature recovery strategy. So, perhaps we can do a bit more in terms of how we communicate that, and that may be something this committee would like to look at. Derek.
Thanks, Matt. Just to pick up then on the environment policy, good spot that it needs to be updated. It has been updated, and we're just in the act of scheduling it for the relevant cabinet members' approval, which should happen, I think, this side of the autumn. So we're just finalising the report that will take that through. As far as the team itself is concerned, we've had one or two kind of HR-related issues with actually establishing and recruiting, but we're on with that now. It will sit within, potentially as a discrete team, a new team within my part of the department, because we're looking to appoint a group manager level post, which will then see the status, if you like, of that team being equal to the other functions that we've set aside. So that's the plan. What the team won't do is directly manage every single piece of environmental and climate change related piece of work. What they will have is a significant role in ensuring that all of that activity, because most of our services will make a contribution towards carbon reduction and the carbon reduction plans that we've got. They'll play a big role in coordinating and leading the coordination of that. and ensuring that where there are gaps in the work that we're doing, or there are opportunities for us to do things in a new way or in a more coordinated way, they'll be leading that work. They'll also, in the medium term, be leading work to make a significant contribution towards not just a carbon neutral council, but a carbon neutral Nottinghamshire as well. So absolutely we're at that point where we haven't quite got the people in post yet, but when they are in post, we will have a standalone senior team, and their role will be both a mixture of coordination, leadership, and, if you like, kind of conversation leadership, both within the council and with partners and the public as well.
Thank you very much, Derek. Okay, so... Oh, sorry, Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman. I think just a point I'd like to see on the future work programmes, again, it couldn't be answered today, but where our relationship is with VIA now, after 3 years, what we're doing around efficiency-wise to make it, obviously, not only savings, which need to make also more efficient for our residents. So if I give an example, still, we've got very good district manager in Rushcliffe, for example, but a lot of our time seems to be spent sending emails to residents, which do all that research, etc. Could that be better done by the customer service team? And then she's more freed up to do a lot more of the work which she should be doing, which she's very, very good at in terms of obviously work ourselves and the wider Rushcliffe area to coordinate work. So I think just understanding now, rather than have these two standalone teams that perhaps we still have in certain areas, it looks to me that if we do, what we can do to further those efficiencies to obviously make it one better operation overall. So, like I said, I know I might not want to answer today, but it's just about going forward. So future work programme, I'd like to see that going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Butler, and then we'll move on to the next presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, yes, I mean, it's a really useful presentation, this, because even though some of us have been around for a few years now, we sometimes forget just how much the Police Department is responsible for, and so it's always helpful to have the nudge. Similar to the other questions about the other organisations we're involved with, I wonder if there's a possibility or thought about looking at the ARC relationship, especially given the amount of investment and work that's going to be done in terms of buildings and all the rest of it. But I do wonder whether we, and I'll put my hand up to a certain extent here, whether we all necessarily quite understand how it all works with ARC, and whether we are seen primarily as a client or as a key stakeholder, or a bit of both. And I know we are, but maybe just to get our heads around that might be useful, because it is a big area, isn't it? So just a thought for the future.
Thank you very much, and we'll hold that thought and add that straight to the list at the end, if that's all right. I'm going to hand over to Martin now to quickly run through a presentation on scrutiny and select committees, and then we'll sort of go around all the members if anybody's got suggestions of items that they want to that they think we should be scrutinising over the coming year. So Martin, it's all yours if you're connected.
Fantastic. Right, I'll...
Chief Technical Officer.
Yeah, I'm amazed at being at a council where technology actually works. But so I will try and keep it as brief, or scrutinised. I'll try and keep it as brief as I can, because obviously I'm sure you're wanting to get on to actually talking about some items to go on the work programme. So this is just a quick visual reminder of the scrutiny structure here at the County Council, and the relationships between the committees. There's really three key relationships that each committee has. It's the relationship with the Overview Committee, with the three select committees, in that they will ultimately approve the work programme for this committee. The key relationship with Cabinet, in that the Overview Committee and the three select committees are there to hold the Cabinet to account. And the relationship with the other select committees, as there will be topics that may be cross-cutting. It's most likely to be the CYPS Committee and the Adult Social Care Committee, but it could work between any of the committees. And then there's also the relationship with the Health Scrutiny Committee and the Police and Crime Panel. So this is really about the role of overview and scrutiny. So the role that you'll undertake on this committee is fundamental to ensure good governance at the council, and it's sometimes in scrutiny members can feel a little bit like on the sidelines, but really if you do scrutiny well, you really are front and centre in in the governance processes. Under the system of executive decision-making that's now in place, scrutiny is essential, as executive arrangements cannot be in place without there being a scrutiny function in place, so you are vital to the governance of the council. And as I think the Vice Chair said, that you're not decision-makers, but you do play an essential role of the decision-making process in that you're there to act as, it's a phrase that you often hear with regard to scrutiny, as a critical friend, and to hold the administration to account. So it's a really important role. And again, as I think the Vice Chair says, the role of scrutiny should be non-political, and that is so important. All scrutiny members are there to represent all residents of Nottinghamshire and to ensure that they receive the best possible service. So it's really important to start thinking about topics. You're not just thinking about your local areas or very specific groups of people. You're there to represent everyone, because obviously every member of the council hasn't got the privilege of being a member of a scrutiny committee. So scrutiny activity can be really wide-ranging. It can include reviewing services to see if they're functioning as well as they can, or it can be raising issues that have areas of concern that are being raised by residents if they're having problems with particular services. Obviously, you'll get to know that through your casework. And perhaps more excitingly, there's also a real opportunity for scrutiny to have a key role in the pre-decision stage of developing policies and strategies of the council, and often the best and most impactful scrutiny is the pre-decision type. However, to have all these achievements and activities, it's really important that we develop an effective work programme that enables scrutiny to be focused where it can have the most benefit and impact for both the council and its residents. So having a good work programme really is the foundation of all scrutiny. Next one. So just a bit on the work programme in process. So it details it there, like I say, very broadly. First thing, identify the issues, then prioritise the topics, then we plan the work, then we do the work, and then we review it. It's important to get into a process of identifying the key issues that you'd like to look at. We'll all do this. Obviously, this is the final one, so after today, we'll now start the process of looking at them and starting the prioritisation process. And then when you've done that, we then need to start thinking about how that work will actually be done, because there's various ways that scrutiny work can actually take place. So you can have a report to a committee and discuss it in this forum. You can have a very long task and finish group that could take 3, 6 months or even a year to complete, hopefully not a year, but it does happen. And then you can do like very short, kind of like spotlight reviews, where you'll have like meetings outside the formal committee process, 2 or 3 meetings, then you'll write a short report, and that's a really good way of conducting scrutiny. And as I think, again, the Chair or Vice Chair said, or probably both, we can't look at everything. Like we've got a limited number of meetings. I think it's a minimum of 4, but there may possibly be more, but it's still not going to be a huge lot of meetings, and there's only so much time that everyone's got. So you can't look at everything. So topics really need to be kind of like broad-ranging rather than looking at very, very specific things. So that's where you'll get the most impact. This is probably the most important bit, really. Like, there's quite a lot of information there. It's probably a little bit small, so I'll run through it. So when, obviously before we get into the discussion, so when you consider potential scrutiny items, I think there's 3 key points that I always go on about, and I've gone on about for years. When considering a topic for scrutiny, you've got to think, is it a topic where scrutiny can make a positive impact, or where scrutiny can make a difference? Is the issue a council priority as detailed in the council plan? And is the topic an issue that is of interest to or makes an impact on residents across the county? And if a scrutiny topic doesn't meet all of those 3 to some or greater extent, you really have to question why scrutiny looking at this. It's got to meet those priorities. If you could do the most lovely review in the world, but if scrutiny can't impact anything, you can't do it. It's like trying to we're going to review the weather. Like you can't change it. It might make a lovely project, but there's not a lot of point of looking at it. And then, as I said earlier, like I say, once you've decided the topic, it's then how best to look at it, because some topics will fit better to being discussed in committee, and some will fit better to a short review, and some like when I was at Rotherham, I did a report for a year on commission services on CSE, and that was the best way of doing it, even though it was a very long and hard way of doing it, but that was the right way of approaching that thing, just because of the different methods of research and evidence gathering that we had to go through. Like I say, topics can be very specific, but ultimately scrutiny will make the most impact if you look at like broad topics, obviously with a specific scope, but wide-ranging topics. You don't want to be looking at the problem of a particular road junction or a particular thing in a particular area, because while you may get some results from it, it's not going to make a big impact to lots of residents. And obviously, you are here to work for all residents across the county. And then finally, probably on this slide, there's the issue of capacity. There is only so much that can be done in the meetings by yourselves. Obviously, you've all got other things to be doing as well, and by the officers as well that are here to support you both in democratic services and in the department. So it's really important that we have a really good focused work programme that makes sure that everyone's energy and time is used in the most effective way possible. And then this is the final slide you'll be glad to hear. This just briefly details the scrutiny review process. So you scope the review, gather the evidence, evaluate it, report and make recommendations, implement and monitor. And I think for me, the key thing is the monitoring. You can make the most lovely recommendations in the world, the most thoughtful and well-written recommendations, but if they're not monitored for their implementation, what's the point? I've seen so many scrutiny recommendations over the years that they're made and then they just disappear into a black hole, and they don't, because they've not been monitored correctly, they've not been chased up in advance. So having a really strong monitoring role of what you've actually done, so bringing a report to each committee, like looking what you've previously recommended, and then discussing how they're being implemented is really important. So that is it. So over to the chair and we can have the discussion.
Thank you very much for that, Martin. Very comprehensive, and I'm sure that will help to guide members as we come up with a list. So I think what we're going to do is just try and gather as many items as possible, and then sort of separately outside of the meeting we'll go through all the items and see if they meet all those tests, and what can be done first, and try and put it into a work program. So what just as before we do get onto that, I don't want to sort of get into a discussion about each of the items really today, because that's not what we're here for. We're here to try and put together a work program so that then those items can be worked on and discussed properly. I think we're not going to do them justice if we attempt to try and discuss each of the items today. So I'll open it up to the floor. I think I'm going to ask Councillor Ogle first, because I know you're going to you've got to disappear at 12 o'clock. Is that right? So do you want to put your microphone on?
I'd back what Councillor Butler says regarding ARC, and have a look into that relationship, particularly as I believe ARC is going to be managing VIA, so that is very appropriate. And so I'll pass on to other people.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ogle. So I think we can sort of extend that basically to all the arm's length companies and not just ARC. I think if we sort of cover all of those off, I think that's probably the best thing to do with that. Councillor Hollis, I know you wanted to come in. And then.
So just to brief things, and I will reiterate this, as I'm sure all the groups have done this, is kind of from the Independent Alliance group as well as myself. So I think members will agree that the biggest thing that hits our post bags is the highways, and I think the Highways Review Panel cross-party did a fantastic job. Now obviously that remit sits with us, and I think it'd be really important to continue it, but also make sure that the recommendations that they put forward are enacted, which I think was cross-party and really good. And I think, you know, members will probably agree that there's been 4 months since the Highways Review Panel finished. Yet I'd arguably say, certainly from my own perspective, an increased use of ViaFix and less stuff on the ground. So we just want to make sure that the reviews, that the recommendations were put forward are enacted. Something that we've got, I believe we've got 4 items altogether, but I think Councillor Purdue-Horan would probably prefer to raise one of them. So the second one being a review into the bus services. Last year we were pleased to announce the council they backed the 98 million Better Bus Fund. The 3 billion fund was set to bring bus services up to London standards. Had been reduced to a 1.4 billion fund. In April, the government announced that Nottinghamshire had been allocated an indicative fund of 30.1 million to improve bus travel. This was only a third, of course, what we bidded for. I'd like the committee to carry out a full review of bus provision in the county, especially in the rural areas. The recent news that Trent Barton have decided to axe the 141 services to the City Hospital, Kingsmill Hospital and dozen communities, such as the Carsick Estate in my division. We need to have a look at the unreliability of the services and routes and identify the whole community who will increasingly become isolated, and I'm sure members will all have similar stories in their area. So the review of the highways panel, number 1, bus services, number 2, and then probably a third one, which is slightly of a lesser time-consuming issue, was a review into armed services personnel. So members of the Transport Environment Committee, we agreed to do a feasibility study into free bus off-peak travel for armed services. Nothing seems to have happened since the committee agreed that. So I think as a review panel, I think it's really important that we ensure that decisions the council have taken, of course cabinet members now, are actually going into force. So it's not just reviewing what the cabinet members do, but also making sure that the officer team are prioritising decisions I think we make. So the armed services personnel being the one we've picked up on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hollis. Councillor Introna, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 things really. I'd like to talk just about parking enforcement and again on bus services, but before I do that, I'd just like to say that in the last year, as Vice Chairman of the Economic Development Committee, led by Councillor Girling, I've had the benefit of being able to deal directly with the police team on a number of issues, whether through that committee or through some of my industry within my division, and I've found the guys and ladies in the team to be of the utmost professional calibre. So thank you for that, and thank you for your presentations this morning. Just on bus services, and I'm hopeful that what I'm going to say is fairly common around the county as well. I represent a largely rural community where we're seeing reductions in bus services on a scale that we've not seen before. There was talk about COVID being the impact over the last year or so, but services are not being reinstated, and one of the impacts particularly is on our senior citizens who do have concessionary travel, who are seeing often the off-peak services being the ones that are being removed. And I just wondered, as part of the working programme, whether we could just look at, is it possible to consider any time or even peak travel? Because the alternative, if they're wanting to go to local doctors, for instance, often our seniors are keen to get there first thing in the morning. Afternoons are often the most difficult times. They're the periods where they're having to wait the longest in a doctor's surgery. And I just wondered if we could just at least have a review of what the potential financial impact might be, because unless the bus is full, I don't see the impact there. Secondly, on parking enforcement, again, I think an area of concern for many parents, many residents, is parking around schools and some of our local retail areas. We have parking enforcement officers in our towns, and sometimes I think that residents do wonder about the appropriateness of having these officers that are often sometimes just waiting for people to be 5 or 10 minutes late from the shopping, when we've got issues all over the county in terms of parking around schools. And I would be a strong advocate if we were able to just consider how do we get some of these parking enforcement officers out into the community on a random basis. I know that we have the parking cars, the camera cars, but we've got 2. And I just think potentially sends a message for us and just ask if it's something that we can look at within the programme. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Introna. I got Councillor Upton next.
Thank you, Chairman. I get regular correspondence, verbal and email and phone, from residents about recycling, particularly glass recycling and curbside glass recycling, for that matter food waste, you could argue. But there is a rumour mill that says although residents separate glass into green, white and brown, at the end of the day the rumour says it's all put together, and why do we bother? So, I mean, that's the detail. Upper level, could there be a review of the Veolia PFI, which I think's got another 8 or 10 years to run, because that's linked to recycling, and you could put into the mix what about green waste, and you know, looking at that. So the high level thing is a review of the Veolia PFI, the lower level glass, food, green waste, recycling, and the second item, I think it was touched on by Councillor Introna to a degree. I do get a huge postbag about parking of vehicles fully on the pavement, not half on it, fully blocking the pavement regularly. I've met the police who say, well, we can take no action unless we see it happening. Give us a ring on 111 or whatever. But by the way, we'll probably not get there in time. They'll have parked up and gone, so don't bother with us. The county council, well, you know, they're not on the road, but I argue they're on the pavement. and there's a whole mix of going around that. Nobody seems to take ownership of cars parked on the path and blocking wheelchairs, blind people, mobility scooters and the rest. And it just goes on and on, year in, year out, and I never seem to get an answer. There may not be one, but those were my two issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Upton. Councillor Gowland was...
Thanks. I second everything that's been said. I really like the idea of peak time travel. Now peak times are changing, but maybe the buses could be extended to other public transport. On the parking, totally agree as well. I wonder if it could be extended to look more broadly at residents' parking, because I represent an urban area, and in some of the terrace streets there's a real problem for residents' parking. We need to also possibly consider EV charging points and how that's going to impact on parking, and possibly car share schemes. I brought both these issues up at the previous committee, and I think they've got lost. But I think there's a whole thing there with parking, and I wonder if there are new ways of looking at parking enforcement now, you know, with technology and cameras and things being used more broadly. I think a general look at the school estate and how it's managed, access to digital technology for residents and how that's provided for presumably by Inspire, and making sure that that's available everywhere and available at high quality. Probably reviewing the activities of the climate change team and weed management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My fellow Mansfield Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. Well, you've took the parking one out of what I was going to say, Penny. That's fine. For me as well, and I think it's for residents across the county, the increase in families accessing free school meals. And obviously there's been a lot in the papers and that about schools having to cut the portion sizes or even the quality of food down for what our young children are getting. Can we sort of like scrutinise that and make sure that that's not happening across Nottinghamshire, and that we're going to be very supportive of these vulnerable children? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we're noting all these down, so they'll all get discussed. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman. I think first of all, about the parking enforcement, I completely want to concur with that one. I think it's also not just it's also our relationship with the police. So before I've gone to county council and been told it's a police matter, you go to the police, go to county council matter, and you go, right, okay, if I'm confused, what the resident's going to be thinking. And to me, I think our approach to it needs to be stronger, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think, you know, we not only, you could say, of course, you're bringing revenue, but that's not the point. It's about the point, actually, the issue about the safety, because some of the points already made. I've got schools on very tight residential roads, and it is the biggest source of complaint is about the parking around there, and the fact that like I say, CCTV capture cars, again, I put the requests in all the time, but again, with only 2 cars, I'm sure if everyone else putting the requests in, you've only got a certain capacity they can go around, and it always happens, they also tend to turn up. One the other day I was down there, he turned up at 9:15, and of course someone by then are in, so of course there's no problem. Well, it was half an hour ago, so we can look at that as well. Around the, building on the point I made about buyer earlier, I think also just looking at, making sure that we are looking at buyer efficiencies like we have all our departments of the county council, because if I bring an example of the weed spraying that we outsource, is that do we outsource because it's more efficient for us cost-wise, which, okay, understand, or is it because we haven't got the capacity? Should we be looking at all the things we are doing to make clear if we can bring in-house, if it's going to be a capital expenditure up front, we're going to save that money over time, but we can actually manage it ourselves, that'd be better. I know there's been problems with quite a few of our contracts in the past, not to the but ones we've had before. And again, things like when we are bringing outside companies like Tarmac, etc., is that because of capacity issue that we've got? But again, is it because it'd be more efficient to have more teams ourselves, or is it actually more efficient to have those? I think just understanding that, so we are absolutely clear, and like I say, just look at them as if we would do any department within the actual county council, because if we fully own it, it's obviously our taxpayers' money. We need to make sure we're getting the best value and obviously the best delivery service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Purdy-Horan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spotted in Mr. Elliott's list something that said it has to be close to the interests of local residents. And in case I apologise for being a bore on this, no doubt some people will roll their eyes. But in January of this year, the former Transport and Highways Committee announced that there would be a review of strategic recycling across the county. It's all sort of gone a bit quiet, as it's ultimately the responsibility of this committee. I wonder whether the recommendations, if they come out sometime during the summer, that we could, or this committee could, review those recommendations or scrutinise them. Thank you. Obviously, I'm coming from the perspective of a very inadequate situation in the south of the county that we currently have, so I'm keen to obviously improve that.
Thank you very much. We'll get that on the list and we'll look into that one. Are there any other points? Councillor Gurley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. One of the things I promised to do when I took on the role as Chairman for Economic Development Asset Management was to review all of our buildings and assets within the county. Obviously, we're sat in quite a significant asset here, quite a significant building, and when you look around, I'm not sure it's being utilised the best way it could be. So I'd really like to put onto your list of scrutiny looking at how we utilise this building and also Trent Bridge House. And then because of the hybrid way of working now, it's changed things round. Yeah, are we getting the best value out of this building or not? And if not, what would we like to do? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who's not, or if there's anything that anybody's just thought of or thought was going to come up, or no? Okay. Oh, go on, Councillor Gowland.
Well, it's not to add something; it's just to ask: this is an ongoing process? So if something comes up next time, yeah, thank you.
Absolutely is, yeah. So all we're trying to do here is get an initial bunch of things, so that we're not sat for the next 3 meetings with nothing to do because nothing's popped up in our heads. So that we've got things to do. But absolutely, if something important, critical, urgent comes up, then that can move up to the top of the list straight away, or as is necessary. And it's a constant. It's going to be, it's not a fixed in stone work program. It's going to be a constantly sort of changing work program. And some of the things that have been discussed today might not end up on the work program, or might end up very low down the list of the work program. But you know, they may not end up on the work programme because they don't meet the criteria or whatever. So, so that's what we'll be going away to discuss now, and then bring in a work programme to the next meeting. But in answer to your question, it's not fixed in stone, and things can be added to it and jumped up the list as well. So with that, it's 1 o'clock, and I just want to thank. Oh, it's just sorry. It's
Keep us here for another hour. We can keep going.
Absolutely. Need a bigger clock. Bigger clock. It's 12 o'clock. Thank you very much. It's 1 o'clock somewhere, Central European time. So thank you very much to all the members of this committee for coming along. Thank you very much to our place service directors and the corporate director for the excellent presentation earlier. I just want to also thank the cabinet members for appearing today. So Councillor Girling and Councillor Clark, thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you both at future meetings, depending on what the subjects are. So I wish you all the best, and we'll see you in September. Thank you very much.